Hi there, I'm Richard Hill, the host of eCommerce One, and welcome to episode 197. Now, in this episode, I speak with Tim Fairs. Tim's led the marketing at some of the largest high street brands: Virgin, Clinton's, Currys, Sainsbury's, Comet, Bestway, and ProCook, to name just a few, over the last nearly 30 years, bringing an absolute wealth of experience when it comes to omnichannel and brand strategy. We go down memory lane on some of the winners and losers in the UK high street and the significant changes in buying behaviour. Is the high street still winning? Tim's take, which will definitely surprise you. We go deep on in-store experience and why it's literally killing so many retailers, and of course, what to do about it. We chat about brand story and the importance of standing out. A brilliant episode which will really make you think big picture and many, many actionable snippets. And of course, so much more in this one. If you enjoy this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast, so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now, let's head over to this fantastic episode. Hi, Tim. How you doing?
I'm good, Richard. How are you? You all right?
I'm really well, actually. Really good, actually. I'm 24 hours away from jumping on a plane and going to Marbella, so I can't wait for that.
Lovely. It's a bit warmer than Lincoln, then.
Yeah, I hope so, yeah. It can't make its mind up, can it, the weather in the UK this last week or so. So I'm looking forward to maybe my final bit of sun for the year, but we'll see. I think before we get into the nitty-gritty, it'd be great for you to introduce yourself, Tim, and how you got into the world of e-commerce and what you've been up to to today.
I've worked in retail marketing, Richard, for 25 years for a number of different high street brands. So Virgin, Dixon's, McColl's Retail Group, Morrison's. I started off in advertising and media originally, working with big agencies in London. And then over the subsequent years, I've got involved in all aspects of marketing. And then the last 10 years, more in e-commerce. So I've worked on building sites on Magento, Shopify, and I'm familiar with the whole tech stack. So whether that's SEO, Crow, CRM, affiliate, it's all about traffic conversion and increasing the basket.
So vast array of experience going back.
I wouldn't go as far as that, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, some very well-known sort of brands in the UK and obviously further afield that I can obviously see that you worked at. I think, Clinton's, you worked at Clinton's for a while. That's quite one of my go-to brands when I need to buy, when I realise it's my wife's birthday tomorrow or it's a wedding anniversary. The challenge I have is it's my wife's anniversary and our wedding anniversary, so our wife's birthday and our wedding anniversary back to back. So Clinton's usually saves the day.
Well, it's got that reputation, actually, Richard.
Yeah.
Then it does particularly well with men of your sort of demographic, if I can say that.
Thank you.
Because they do a really good quality card, and of course you get really good help and advice in there as well. So if you're a man that's sort of struggling a bit, you can invariably get some suggestions from the staff there. So
yeah, no, they've been very helpful. Although I think the one in my city has actually closed down, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably has.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, there were 3 Clintons in my local town. 3.
Yeah.
Of course, in those days, Card Factory weren't around and the supermarkets weren't really selling them either. And Moonpig didn't exist. So,
yeah, obviously that
world has moved on.
Time sort of ties in quite well with where I'm sure we'll go in a little moment. But obviously, that sort of retail piece where some of the bigger, well-known brands or fairly well-known brands that a few of our listeners that are of a similar age to me and maybe yourself have grown up and loved over the years. But obviously the high street is changed, somewhat.
Do you remember Blockbuster, Richard?
Of course, yeah. I used to love going and getting my 3 videos on a Friday night and trying to get them back on a Sunday as we're going to get the extra fine.
So I was head of marketing at Blockbuster back in the day.
Were you?
And when I talk to my children about having to get in a car, drive to a store, choose your movie, hope that it's in stock, pick up your Ben and Jerry's and your Haagen-Dazs, take it home, watch it, and then you've then got to take it back, because if you don't take it back, you'll get a fine. And they're thinking, what am I talking about? So
you did what? Are you mad?
Yeah, you can just sort of button and download it.
And now they've got 500,000 films at a click. Yeah, I guess there's so many angles we could go with that sort of context. I think I really very, very fondly remember like you do, I think, going to Blockbuster and that experience of going into a retail store and, or going into Blockbuster and spending maybe quite some, having the time just to have a good read and have a good look. And obviously that shift now, that just doesn't exist. And, Netflix.
But it made it an occasion though, didn't it? You look forward to browsing through and choosing your favourite movie and arguing with your other half about which film you watch and picking up your ice cream and your Coke. And it just made it more of an event like it is going to the cinema. Whereas now it's just very, very easy, isn't it? And it doesn't feel as special.
No.
So, those are the days.
I guess we put, in our house, we put a movie on every night, I would think. Pretty much 5 nights a week, or continue watching a series. Whereas 20 years ago, it was quite a moment, wasn't it? Going there and doing that and picking up a movie or two for the weekend, and it's all movie weekend sort of thing, where it's just quite normalized it. I'm a massive cinema fan. I think we've actually hired the Everyman for the 200th episode of this podcast on the 10th of October. So any listeners now that haven't booked in, you've got about, when this goes live, I think you've got about 2 weeks left to join us on the 10th of October. I'll just drop that in there.
And of course, you were spending money on it as well. So you were concentrating on the film more. You were taking it more seriously. You were sort of focusing on it. Whereas I think now, because it's almost like commodity, if you get up to put the kettle on or go to the little one, it's almost like the cinema at home in those days. So, and then you talk to kids about, you had to wind it forward, wind it back, and what are you talking about?
What are you? When were you born? Like 1925, sort of thing. Yeah.
Steady on, Richard. Steady on. Not that old.
That piece about, I think, with the cinema, you would, when you obviously go to the cinema, you're focused on that experience. You're not on your phone. But when you're watching something at home with, Netflix, Amazon, etc., you're maybe half-assed watching it because you're connected. You got your iPad over here. Maybe it's quite an interesting one, because I think, that sort of having that time to just focus on something and get away and get submerged into that world of that film, it's quite a special moment, which I think, I definitely don't spend enough time actually watching the thing that's on. I'm just going to I need to get a shirt. I'll just jump on XYZ website. I'll do that. I'll just quickly look at the diary for tomorrow. I've got to respond to free email. Bum, 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 bum. But that noise, you don't get that.
They call it lean forward or lean back. So lean forward is when you're being incredibly attentive, you're focusing, you're really interested in the content, and nothing is going to distract you. Whereas leaning back is more passive. And you can get distracted very easily. And as you say, a lot of people use different devices now. So they can be watching the TV, looking at the tablet, on the mobile, and the quality isn't quite the same.
I guess I would say also, like, people that are listening to us right now, something I do when, we've got a lot of business owners, a lot of senior marketers that are, juggling a lot of stuff, shall we say. And what I do, some days, not too many days, it's quite a few actually, but what I'll do is I'll have a quick little look at the Odeon, quick little look at the Everyman, and it might be like a Tuesday afternoon, there's nothing in the diary, and I might just sneak off on the odd afternoon and have a sit in the cinema, just when I'm maybe not quite in the flow with work, and I've got maybe a lot going on and I just need a little bit of a reset, have a little walk, but also I just go and plonk myself in the cinema. Obviously, not going to be on my phone. I have to make sure my phone's off. And have that couple of hours midday or in the day every now and then. I know it's not as easy as that for a lot of people. It's not for me. I have a lot of time, but just have that little time to disconnect is quite nice. Yeah.
Well, and you escape. That's the way I would describe it. You feel like you're in a different world. You're completely detached from reality when you're in that sort of situation, in that environment. Whereas, again, when you're at home, you're not sort of detaching yourself from your normal life, if you like. So it's more profound, I think, when you make it more of an occasion. So. Yeah.
So the high street, a lot of people, depending on what high street you walk down, will say, high street's dead. What's happening here? There's, depending on what city or town that you're walking through, it's going to vary somewhere. But what would you say to people that say the high street is dead?
Well, it's not dead, Richard. If you look at the stats, if you look at total retail sales, 75% of all the cash is taken from shops. E-commerce is about 25%.
Yeah.
And even during the heights of COVID, it only got to about 35% on e-commerce. So still a vast majority were buying in stores. And when you consider the average transaction value in a store is about typically half that of online, and the number of baskets in retail is considerably higher than e-commerce as well. So no, I don't think the high street is dead by any stretch.
No. So people are very much still going out, obviously. I mean, it sounds like a daft question, obviously, but of course, still going out. What are some of the things that some of the retailers are doing, that are the retailers that are sort of winning on the high street? What are some of the things that they're doing that our listeners should think about? That, we have a lot of listeners that are obviously on the channel, got a lot of stores. I know we've got quite a lot of listeners that have hundreds of stores and, 50 plus million turnover on their e-com. And what are some of the successful retailers doing?
Well, I think what they're doing is they're picking a lane and they're standing for something different. Now, that could be your products, that could be your in-store experience, it could be the knowledge and staff expertise. I'm a true believer in, as a retailer, you got to think about what is your point of difference and what is going to differentiate you from a competitor. What's going to encourage a customer to go to your store rather than crossing the road to someone else's. And I think also recognizing that most customers do start online. So whilst it's the case that e-commerce is the minority in terms of cash, most customers will start online and then they'll probably buy in a retail environment. So I think blurring the lines between online and in store, bricks and mortar, is really, really important. Don't treat the channels independently. Treat them as one immersive brand experience, if you like. I think just this week I had an experience of looking for a tuxedo. I don't own a tuxedo, and I thought we've been nominated for quite a few awards coming up, and I thought, well, I can hire or I can buy. So I thought, let's do this, let's go and buy a tuxedo, a little treat. We've got a few awards coming up and a few events. So I was passing a store, but they just didn't have my sizes in, and the variety. What, a 24-inch waist, Richard?
That's it. 24-inch waist, 48-inch chest, and it was very tricky. Very, very. When I was 8 years old, maybe. If you see me in person, it's quite amusing because I'm actually 6'7" or nearly 6'8", and just a ball of muscle.
I'll have to take that for granted because you've got no way of proving that, really. It's just thin as your head. I could probably guess for 17.
One of those stats is true, actually.
Right, okay.
One of the two. But ultimately, I went in store. They didn't have the variety. They didn't have my size. I am genuinely nearly 6'8", 6'7.5", and that's a common problem. Obviously, then I go online. I ordered various jackets, various trousers. They came the next day, and I spent a couple of hours trying it all. I bought a lot of stuff. It's like 6 jackets, 4 suit trousers, waistcoat, 2 pairs of shoes, shirt, the whole shebang. Knowing that, I would settle on one of them, maybe 2, depending on. I bought a few like quite outrageous jackets, velvet reds. I quite like live on the edge with the colours.
Yeah, it's anyway, very colourful, very bright and breezy.
Yeah, but then obviously chose 3 or 4 items. Then I had 7 or 8 items to send back. Went to the store. It's Next. I went to Next, and then took them back. And they scanned them, and it was all the way that the online and offline work together. It's just, I find that it works on both sides. I needed to be able to take them back. I needed to be able to go and have a little feel for what some of the items were, but ultimately that range was the reason why I sort of decided to purchase online.
Wouldn't it be great though if Next had already identified what you'd bought from them before, whether that's in store or online? They could see your measurements, your sizes, your preferences in terms of colour, etc., and then you could then book some kind of personal shopping experience in that store, and they've already got laid out for you in advance.
Yeah, all the sizing,
the tuxedo, exactly, all ready to go. They're probably making your favourite drink if they're doing a good job. Whether that's a G&T or a coffee or a mug of tea. So, I mean, that's a really good example where I think a retailer could blur the lines between the two and treat the customer as an agnostic customer, whether that's in store or online.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I mean, what else would you say to listeners around sort of improving that in-store experience? What else are you seeing with sort of successful retailers?
I think you've just got to think about, why do people go in store, and what are the benefits of buying online that you can inject in a store environment? So a good example of that would be, having QR codes on the product, so you can scan and watch the video content, read customer reviews,
even in store,
even compare pricing, in store, exactly, and creating video content on screens. So just think about, what are the benefits of buying online and how can I inject that in my in-store environment?
Yeah.
And also doing what Lush have just announced. They're actually adding services to their product experience. So you can now, at their flagship store, I think it's Regent Street, you can get a massage and a spa and get treatments in the basement, as well as buying their great range of products in the store. So I think, it's about trying to close the gap between online and in store, and think about a really good immersive brand experience. Because websites, it's much more challenging to create a brand experience online than it is in store. If you go to Lush, you've got fixtures, fittings, lighting, flooring. You've got colleagues. It's much easier to create an immersive brand experience in a store compared with online.
So true, isn't it? We went. We were in Singapore in the summer for a few days and passing through, and we went to a guitar shop. We just walking past, didn't know it was there. Walked past, and we were with friends, and their son's absolutely obsessed with. He can play, and he's got about 5, 6, 7. Probably tell me he's got more than that, but it's my wife's godson, and he's obsessed with guitars. So we went in. And they're everywhere, it's like row after row, and he's like, his eyes are like, oh my gosh, like he's never been in a guitar shop like this. But what they had, going to that experience piece, built with that was, a cafe with old school, like record players where you could take records off the shelf, put them on the record player, put your headphones on, and it was quite amusing because like most people, we saw the records, it was like, a lot of the UK bands, Oasis was everywhere, sort of thing. And we're in the middle of Singapore, and then there was like a VIP room where you could go and play the guitar. If it was electric, hook it up to this ridiculous sound system, and then there's a keyboard area. But just the experience element, building it in like a cafe, where you can then try the different instruments as well in the different rooms. I thought I've not seen. It sounds quite obvious when you say it out loud, but.
No, not many companies do it because they think about the overhead. And I worked at ProCook for a period, and we were trying a new kitchen school there where people could come in and we could actually teach them how to cook, which is a great proposition, great experience, and it brings the benefits of the product to life. And then the other retailer I worked for many moons ago was Virgin Megastores, and you talk about the brand experience there. Well. We had a basement along the Oxford Street store, which is kind of the flagship store, and we had bands playing there, whether it's established bands or new startups. And you could actually go down and watch a band perform it and be. That's what I mean about an immersive brand experience. You can't do that online in the way in which you can do that in store.
So if you're with us still, what can you add to your experience, someone's coming in your stores just to sort of give you that edge? Or, just, right at the beginning, you mentioned QR codes. Sort of QR codes have come back, haven't they? They were sort of here and they were, and then they disappeared. And this last probably year or two, they're everywhere again, which I think is great. I think a simple QR code, as you said, you're scanning an item and then you're bringing that online experience in store where you've got reviews, UGC content potentially, a whole host of information around that product. You can layer in the whole, the background of if it's, your clothing, the sustainability message, the UGC, obviously you can bring in the whole experience from the website on that potential customer's phone, but then they're actually got the product in their hand as well. It's best of both worlds, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. But if I think about, conversion rates are really important on e-commerce, and conversion rates are very important in store. And all the different retailers I've worked for, conversion rates vary from as low as 20% up to as high as 82%, something of that order. So you've always got customers in your store who aren't buying. And it begs the question, why are they not? And in many cases, they're looking for knowledge and expertise and advice. They're looking for people to help them out. Dixon's was a great example of that, where conversion rate was running about 32%. So a vast majority were walking around, couldn't find anybody to advise them. Actually, probably knew more about the product than the sales did at the time. It just wasn't a very good conversion rate. So that retailer invested heavily in terms of learning development for the staff. We're on a training program.
Very technical products. So
exactly.
A lot of knowledge required, and
so I think having really knowledgeable, engaged, motivated staff is really, really important.
You see that now in Couriers. Obviously, it's part of the same, or I think it's maybe different ownership now, but very much, I used to live in PC World back in the day, which is all part of the same group. All part of the same group. And I did a lot of business with them, actually. My previous business, I used to buy all their returns. It was my business, actually, for 10 years. Okay. So I had a contract with it's now called Know-How, but it was called Mastercare back in the day. And I had the contract for all the PCs from the whole of the UK and all the computers. And that was my business for many years. So I was in and out of that store looking at different products and, got to know a lot of the managers because we did a lot of business with them. But back then, just a computer was like £3,000 for a computer. So having that knowledge to understand about that PC, the sale was a big sale. A lot of still is to some degree.
And what would happen, Richard, is that the customer would go in the store, you'd try and find a colleague, maybe you get one. The colleague then sells you probably a model that you don't really need. And then before you leave the store, he'll then say it's going to break. You haven't even got it in the car, let alone got it home.
We semi-relied on them breaking because we would buy all the returns.
Exactly. Of course, there is a risk that this is going to break, it's going to fail. What would you do? Have you got kids at home? Oh, yeah, I've got kids at home. Well, you're buying a washing machine. What's going to happen when it breaks down? Well, we suggest you buy an extended warranty.
The warranties
will cost you this. You can always cancel it with the bank when you get home because the staff are on commission. It was, and John Lewis in the meantime, we're offering free 5-year warranties. We'll come on to Know-How in a minute because I was part of that launch.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah. Oh, we'll definitely come back there. But now I go into Couriers, which is sort of what's left of that brand, from my understanding. There's probably a bit more to it than that. But there's product specialists in each department. Obviously, you walk in, you've usually got the Apple's piece, then you've got the laptops, then you've got all the accessories, then you've got all the maybe slightly more expensive accessories and add-ons, and then you've got a big TV section, and you've usually got a Panasonic guy, a Sony guy. They've really obviously gone to town on that expert knowledge. And, whenever I buy a TV, genuinely, that's my go-to. I go in there, and it's the same guy, I think, for the last 10 years has sold me the 3 TVs I think I've bought. Right. And when we moved in here, we're in new offices now about a year ago. We've had it all, kitted out. We bought, I think, 375-inch, 185-inch. So it's quite a big investment for us, or big, and I went in there, and that guy was in there, and he's like, "Hey, man," and normally he expects me to go and buy one TV, but because of that guy and the experience I've had, I think we spent 12 grand on 4 TVs when we went. I can't remember the exact amount, but that's from that in-store experience and that loyalty of him and the wider, and I got to know a few other people in there, and it's sort of such a key.
It's a really good example where the in-store experience is more valuable than online. I mean, he probably spoke to you about the difference between LCD, LD, OLED, how far are you sitting away from the screen, what sort of room are you using in, what sort of lighting does it have, is it a bright room, is it a dark room, watch movies, sport, documentaries, so, and he will then create a bespoke recommendation against all of those questions. So, and thinking about e-commerce again, and thinking about blurring the lines, some retailers are now offering live video chat where you can literally speak to a colleague in the store in the comfort of your own home. And that's fantastic, because how can you possibly see picture quality or get advice in the way in which you can install? Well, live video chat is one way of trying to
that really kicked in during COVID, didn't it? Obviously, you can't go to the stores, but this in some of that time frame, the staff can be in there, and obviously they're in there and organising pickups and things like that. But you can video chat. I don't know. We've had the company on that sort of initiated a lot of that for Currys, funnily enough, as well. Yeah,
right.
About a couple of years ago. Yeah. So, know-how then. So, tell me what you know about know-how.
Well, it's funny. I was working with Sebastian James. He was the CEO at the time, who then went on to run Boots. And Katie Bickerstaff, actually, who then became joint CEO of M&S. But, I mean, this is the other thing. I've been very privileged to work with some very clever people. And we said Mastercare is a bit of an embarrassment. We were all kind of not particularly happy about selling customers extended warranties. Particularly when our major competitor was offering it pretty much for free. So we decided to scrap the Mastercare business and start again. And it was a fascinating brief, because I agreed with Seb. There were no sort of commercial targets at the time. It was about how do we create a brand that's magical, that is really going to transform the reputation of the business in terms of service, knowledge, and expertise, and hopefully make some money on the back of it. So we work with some very talented brand agencies, design agencies, that sort of thing. We defined what the proposition should be, which is anything after the customer's left the store. So delivery, installation, setup, get the most out of your tech, as well as repair. So we made it a much more positive proposition, rather than it all being about when it breaks. Amazing brand identity, done by a company called Williams Murray Ham at the time, which won all sorts of awards. It was the rainbow button, if you remember, which was all plastered all across the lorries and stuff. A compelling range and proposition, and also work with colleagues in terms of the customer experience. So we said, the know-how in terms of the brand is confident, it's upbeat, it's positive, it's helpful, it talks to you in plain English. And therefore, when the customer delivers your washing machine, or you speak to someone on the phone, or in one of the, what we call the clinics in the stores, we want people to be engaging with customers in that way, using that tone of voice. So, and the sales went through the roof, and it was accredited with changing the perceptions of PC World and Currys to a more positive brand. In fact, at the time, I think there was even discussions around, should we just rebrand the whole business?
That's a really interesting story, because I was very much, as I said, Mastercare was probably close to 10 years of my life. But it was sort of 50% of what I did was, buying, I had lorries every 3 days, 26 pallets at a time of, back and forth. But it had this reputation, unfortunately, whereas now,
it was called Disaster Care, Richard, internally.
I had not heard that, actually.
Disaster Care. We were embarrassed about it, so we wanted to change it. But of course, at the time, the company was making a load of money from it. So, it was a tricky one to relaunch a brand and try and hold on to the commercials.
Well, it's funny, because I think it was probably the most money I've ever had. It was when I was doing that, because what would happen, you buy your computer from PC World, your Packard Bell back in the day. You'd have paid a good $2.5 for a half decent computer back then. It's like £600 now, sort of thing, but less probably. $2.5. You get it home, you plug it in. Maybe it didn't work, or something, quite basic, but didn't work. You go back to the store, they just give you a new one. And then because that's what they did mainly in the early days, for sure.
Yeah.
And then that return would go back to Mastercare, and then 3 or 4 days later, we would get it. We would open the box, and it might just be a memory. It just come loose, and we go, and in probably 20% of the time, we go click, and we've got a £2.5 computer that we probably paid 80 quid for, I think, back in the day, or 40 quid rings a bell, and then we'll sell that for 1,500 quid, which was £1,000 cheaper than PC World could sell it. But so we did.
Sorry, and that's why Dixon Store Group International at the time decided to resource that in-house.
Yeah.
So set up
we got to £1 million a month doing that.
Wow. Well, why not continue doing that then? I mean,
because the market went from PCs being 2.5K to like £300, £400, £500. So the margin difference between second-hand and new just wasn't enough. Yeah. Then we went into new. So then I went into pure. Then we stopped that side of the PC business, and then we imported from China, and I carried on that business for about another probably 8 years after we stopped the relationship with Mastercare.
Right.
But good times. It was like Christmas every week when the containers would, when the pallets would turn up, and we didn't know what we were buying. We just knew we had 150 base units at a fixed price, and some of them were like ridiculously like expensive. Some were, but we just had a fixed price. So it was just a potluck, really, but it worked out.
We concluded at the time 80% of all PC issues are software related, and most of them can be resolved through remote access. I mean, this was just unheard of in those days. The ability to control your mouse remotely and resolve software glitches literally in real time. It was
Well, we used to have a thing in there. So we had a store back then, and we'd call a lot of the errors picnic errors. That was a thing we came up with.
Right.
So somebody would bring a computer back, and my guy would be like, it's a picnic error. I'd be like, oh, yeah, no problem. And a picnic error was a problem in chair, not in computer.
Right. Well,
it just needed a reboot, normally, or a reinstall of something, Now, you might be looking for an SEO boost, a down-to-earth digital PR campaign to share your story, or maybe just some straightforward technical help to amp up your performance. Now that's where Ecom Now comes in. A partner that's all about making things easier for your online store. Our services cover everything from creating professional content for your e-commerce categories to refining your product descriptions. Now whether you're just starting out or have been in it for a while, we're here to deliver real impactful results that add to your bottom line without unnecessary commitments. You can order one-off or multiple projects with a quick turnaround. Simply choose what you need. We've touched on quite a lot of retail, some fascinating sort of insights over the years there, but jump into the sort of online piece. What are maybe 2 or 3 things specifically you see retailers with their online experience? What are they doing? 2 or 3 things to improve the conversion rates with their sites?
I think the first thing, Rich, is you've got to look at usability, and you've got to make sure that customer journey is really simple, quick, and easy. And of course, through conversion rate optimization, you can get various agencies to audit your site, including the likes of Quickfire Digital and the rest. And they can identify exactly what the pain points are along the journey. As well as actually, they're not necessarily pain points, but just making it easier for customers to transact. So that's the first thing I would say. Make sure you've got fantastic availability. Because a lot of retailers get caught out by not having products available on stock, so you can't buy it. And then thirdly, delivery and finance options. So just make it easy for customers to get it delivered at home, be it same day, 24 hours, 48 hours later, a number of different delivery options and payment options, particularly if you're selling high ticket. I think you've got to offer, whether it's Klarna or monthly payments or buy now, pay later. It's just about making it easy for customers to transact.
No, I think that's fantastic. I think amount of sites that, when you go through that list, there's some quite straightforward things that you are just miss, just having the ability to pay with American Express. Now, I think I saw a stat the other day, something like, I think 1.6, I might have got that slightly off, but 1.6% of sales online, American Express. Well, if you're doing 20 million, that's a few $100,000 that just by implementing and having that enabled, it's quite straightforward. Split pay, different payment options, different delivery options. deliver pickup at store potentially, which, going back to my next example where I'm sat right now, I've got a next store 200 meters away. Pick up in store is completely free, with Next, and could potentially be for your retail business, depending on who's listening. Quite an obvious one, but are you using it? Are you doing it? Have you implemented it? Those options, I think it's
the reverse is true as well. If you go in store, maybe some customers want it delivered to their home, particularly if the item is quite heavy, quite bulky. So it comes back to the point around omni-channel and blurring the lines between the two. And conversion. I mean, I've talked about retailers converting between 30% up to 85%. In e-commerce, as you probably know, the average conversion rate is about 3%. I mean, 3%. So 3 levers of traffic conversion and increase the basket. Really easy, isn't it? It's just traffic, conversion, basket. But 97% of customers invariably are coming onto your site and they're not buying. So the ceiling height to increase your revenue and sales is enormous.
When you compare, obviously, a retail store, and conversions, and then obviously e-commerce, there's obviously a vast difference between, if you had a retail store and you're converting 3% of the people that walk in, and it's obviously a shocker, isn't it? You're going to be there 5 minutes, but you sort of accept that, or a lot of people accept, 2-3%, or 1%, 2-3%. Obviously, 3 is a good conversion rate, I think, in most industries. But what if you could get that to 4, 5, 6? Is that possible? Obviously, all these firms spend so much time on acquisition, which, of course, we can do. We've done about 100 episodes on. But obviously, just getting that extra 1% by some of the things we spoke about there. That sort of usability piece, having the options. Just very well laid out. I think.
And watching, sorry, Richard, and observing customers as well. Do real-time testing, get them into your company, and get customers to actually recreate their journey, their transaction journey. And you can start to observe very quickly where things are going a little bit awry, where they're clicking out or they're exiting, or just observing customers is really insightful as well.
We saw we did a similar I was in a meeting with the team probably 2 weeks ago. Business doing about 25 mil, just been acquired by somebody that's got 3 acquisitions, probably going to be about 60 mil turnover with the 3 brands. And, we did some usability testing on their site. And when they got to checkout, pop-ups were going all over the place. And it's like, whoa, they're in the checkout. You need to stop that. Well, there's a bit more to it than that. I won't share too much confidential information, but ultimately, some quite simple changes because it was looked at. That was literally fresh like a couple of weeks ago. So I'll probably do an episode more on that further down the line. But just those...
And personalization as well. I mean, we heard a lot about AI and personalization, but building on the example that we were talking about earlier about your tuxedo, if I land on a homepage, I expect you to show things that are relevant to me based upon what I've browsed and bought in the past. If I'm at the product landing page, I expect you to showcase other products that I might be interested in. When I'm at the checkout, there might be some add-ons or some enhancements that would be useful that can increase the AOV. So I don't see that many retailers and brands doing a good job of personalization, even though it's been talked about for years.
I agree. So I think that ties in quite nicely with brand. Obviously you've worked with a lot of big brands, a lot of investment in brand, but I think that's where maybe a lot of the, mid-tier, smaller e-com brands maybe still need persuading on that investment in brand. What would you say to those guys that are maybe on the fence about that brand investment?
Well, you've got to think about the funnel, haven't you? I mean, the classic funnel is awareness, consideration, conversion, and advocacy. And to really influence each of those layers, you've got to tell your story about your brand, and you've got to raise awareness of it. It's very difficult to make performance-based marketing work if you don't have awareness or you don't have a good understanding about what your brand stands for. So you've got to use a combination of telling your brand story, particularly if you're a founder-led business, you're an entrepreneur, Simon Sinek talks a lot about the why, not the what. I'm sure a lot of your viewers, listeners have heard about that. But that's really, really important. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Why did you create this business? What is your core purpose? What is your reason for being? And tell it to customers, because they love founder businesses and that whole backstory. Brand advertising and marketing may not give you the same return as performance-based, but you're not going to get a performance-based return unless you've told the brand story. So it goes hand in glove, and you can't do one without the other. Yeah.
And that's where we take that 3% to maybe 3.5%, 4%, and get to that, the special place where those conversion rates, you're in the top, 10% in that vertical industry. Yeah. No, I'm completely on the same page.
But also, you talk about conversion, Rich. I agree with that. But the brand story will also help traffic significantly, because if people are aware of you, they know what your point of difference is. By definition, will drive traffic to your site, and you'll still market share from your competitors.
So what we'll do now is, if you're still with us, brands, so you're listening in, contact me. Actually, contact me, richard@ecom1.com or carrieann@ecom1.com, and let's talk about your brand story on the podcast. We love to speak to founders that are running, brands. I've just spoken to one this morning, amazing brand, started 3 years ago, shipped about 3.5 million items in that period, really progressive, doing some amazing things on socials. Your story, no matter what it is, within reason, I'd love to hear it, love to share it on the podcast. So definitely reach out to us, and we'll hopefully play a small part in spreading that sort of founder story, brand story. So Tim, obviously you've worked with a lot of different brands, a lot of brands that really resonate with me. This is sort of almost like you've worked at all my favorite shops. I mean, ProCook. I mean, I'm sure we've got various sets of knives at home from ProCook, and their store in York, I think.
Yeah. In fact, it's one of their best performing stores.
Yeah. I've bought various. I'm a big fan of a good steak knife. Even for my Sunday dinner, I have to have a good steak knife. And ProCook is a store that we go in every sort of 2 or 3 years when we're that way. But obviously, work with a lot of different brands, well-known brands. What are some of the campaigns that you've worked on in the previous roles and brands that you've worked with that really stand out? Maybe sort of really been transformational. Really stand out. Some of the things you've done. You've mentioned a couple of things already, but anything else you could share with the listeners?
I think know-how is probably the best example I can refer to, because that was transformational for the whole business for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. You mentioned about ProCook. I mean, they have a very compelling brand story as well, but it's probably not a story that is particularly well known. I mean, they source products from the Far East, from China. They go directly to source, so they're able to get it at a much lower price. The quality is fantastic. I mean, it's the same, if not better, than the market-leading brands. And they offer it through their stores or online. So, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's and they have some great staff as well. So, and that was founded by Daniel O'Neill, selling saucepans out of his kitchen.
Brilliant!
I mean, it's a fantastic story. It's brilliant.
We need to get him on.
No, definitely. And he's passionate about that business, and it's a really compelling story. And they have a clear point of difference versus Ninja versus Tefal versus all the reputable brands. So I love that shop. But know-how was a game changer, and it won all sorts of awards that year. For the way it had sort of transformed that business. So but my advice is start with the customer. Get under the skin of the customer. Really understand who they are, understand what you're doing well that you can amplify further, but perhaps more importantly, really understand the pain points. What are the things that are stopping your customers buying? Where else are they buying from, and why? And that will give you some very good indicators in terms of what you should be focusing on, and then prioritize it based upon ease versus value. So things that you've identified from customers that are easy to do, to change or implement, that will have a big movement on value, you do first. And things that are perhaps slightly more questionable or are very difficult to do, I'm not saying you don't do them. I'm just saying you deprioritize. You come back.
There's a certain order. Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense, Tim. So we're sitting here with a crystal ball, and we are 18 months in the future. What are some of the things that, where do you see the sort of retail high street going? Those that are going to be doing well, sort of the flying the flag for the high street. What are those brands going to be doing, on the high street?
It's fun, isn't it? We're seeing some out-of-town retailers actually going back onto the high street. I mean, I think, announced recently, Screwfix announced recently. They're clearly identifying that there is a definite role for those guys to play back on the central high street rather than being out of town. I think the other thing I'd say is, you've got to add value over and above the online experience. Now, that could be just a fantastic in-store experience, could be the lighting, the fixtures, the fittings. It could be just incredibly talented, passionate staff.
Yeah.
It could be the product that you're selling is a clear point of difference versus your competitors. But no, I mean, I'm feeling quite positive about the outlook.
Yeah.
I mean, I come back to what we said at the start. Why is it that despite e-commerce's best efforts, it's still running 25% of the cash, not the majority. But I think the two just need to work hand in hand.
Yeah.
They need to complement each other because one needs the other, for sure. But I'm confident that bricks and mortar is going to be around for a while yet. But I also suspect that e-commerce will grow a bit further, particularly if players, brands blur the lines between the store experience and online. I think that's the holy grail for me.
I love that term, blurring the lines between the two. I think that is the key element, isn't it? You're embracing both, but it's just connecting them.
What did PC World say, Richard? I think they said the best of both worlds, didn't they? Oh, they did. Back in the day, they did. And I think that's exactly what I'm saying here. Customers love aspects of online and they love aspects of buying in store. So just try and merge it together more effectively whilst respecting the uniquenesses of the benefits at the same time.
Yeah. Brilliant, Tim. Well, I've really enjoyed our chat. I have a feeling we've had a whistle-stop tour of my favourite stores over the last 30 years, and it seems like you've worked in most of them.
I'm sure there are others that you love.
Yeah, I'm sure we could do it. We could put a couple. So, Tim, I like to end every episode with a book recommendation. Do you have a book to recommend to our listeners?
I think there's a book called Why We Buy, which your listeners probably might have come across. I don't know. It's done by Paco Underhill, and it's a fascinating look under the bonnet of the customer in terms of the psychology that goes into why we buy. And if you're into retail or if you're into e-commerce, it's definitely a must read. It feels like a Desert Island Disc question.
I've not heard that. I've not heard of that book. So I'm intrigued myself.
Why we buy, Paco Underhill.
Yeah, I might have to get it on the download, ready for my my Marbella trip. But we'll see.
Yeah, enjoy your Marbella trip.
Thank you. So, Tim, thank you so much for coming on the show. For those that want to find out more about you, more about the work that you do, what's the best way to reach out to you?
t.fairs@sky.com is my email, or I'm on LinkedIn. Very easy to see on LinkedIn, so I'm quite vocal on it as well. Yeah. But hopefully I've been help to your listeners, and reach out if you need any support or advice. I'm here to help.
And I would really recommend our listeners to follow Tim on LinkedIn. He shares a lot of insights into his, many years on the coal face and a lot of
that, Richard. You make out like I'm in my 70s or something.
I reckon we're similar age, So we've been doing it a little while,
Yeah, that's true.
But we'll link up your LinkedIn and the email, etc. But thanks for coming on the show, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Richard. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast, so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next one.